I did not receive the cancellation message. No reminder, no reason. Only one photo appeared on social media. The whole family was raising their glasses on the yacht. My husband and I pooled money to buy it. My name? Not on the cabin list. Not in frame. Not in any of the stories they tell. I was crossed out silently as if I never existed. But what they didn't expect was, I still keep all the papers. And when the captain bowed to me with a sentence, "Welcome aboard, owner," their whole world turned upside down. If you ever trying to fit in with a family that never really wanted you, then you will want to watch this story to the end. I didn't get angry right away. No screaming. No calling anyone. I just stared at that picture. My husband's whole family, Valora, his sister, was smiling brightly. She raised her glass of champagne like a queen ascending to her throne. On deck, the yacht I used to sit on, choosing every type of chair fabric. What about me? I'm at home, with a suitcase ready 2 weeks ago. At that time, I still tried to tell myself, it could just be a mistake. They may have forgotten to send the message. The trip may change at the last minute. Or worst, maybe I'll be overlooked. I reopened my emails, messages, group chats. There was no mention of my name in the plan. No word from my husband. No talk of schedules or packing. I recall last year, Valora said, "Next trip, we're going to do something big. It's a family tradition," she said while I was making lemonade for the group after the party. I'm not sure if I count as part of us when she says that. The last time I went on a cruise with them was almost 2 years ago. I remember that feeling clearly. Stepping onto the smooth wooden floor, the ocean breeze in my face. Everyone dressed in white. Everyone smiled. I laughed too. But now looking back, there was something in their eyes, as if I were a guest, not family. Valora always has a way of making me feel like I'm in. She often says things like, "We grew up together, we have a lot of old traditions." Emphasis on the word we. But I still think, everything will be fine. Just be patient. Just try a little harder. I once told my best friend, they're probably just not used to having new people. My friend looked at me for a long time. Then he was silent. When I saw that family photo, I was still wearing the white cotton dress I had planned to wear on deck that day. Standing in the middle of the kitchen, my hands were still a little sticky from baking cookies for the trip. I laughed to myself. Not loud. A small lost laugh. Like a loose tooth that has been loose for a long time, finally falling out. And then I saw it. Second photo. Close-up of the cabin division list. Someone probably accidentally left it exposed in the right corner of the photo. A clearly printed list. Each person's name. And there was a name crossed out in red pen. My name. I zoomed in on the photo. Hands shaking so much that the screen shakes slightly. My name is crossed out with a clear and decisive stroke. There can be no mistake. I sat down on the floor, my back against the refrigerator. For a few seconds I thought nothing of it. Just look at the blank space before your eyes. Blank is the name erased from your life. Then I exhaled. Slow. Heavy. And the first sentence I heard in my head was, am I that unimportant to them? The question doesn't hurt as much as the answer. I think back to everything I've done. Not just with the yacht, but with this relationship. I was the one who proposed the investment idea with Lyle, my husband. I was the one who sent the cost calculation file, advising you to choose a low-rise ship because your mother gets seasick easily. I sat through every Zoom meeting with the shipbuilder in Florida. I even picked the boat name, Solstice, because it means a new beginning. Lyle once said, I'm not good at design, but if you can do it all, I'm sure I do. No complaints. And now, I was cut off from the journey, from the group of people I thought was family. I didn't call Valora. She's the kind of person you can't reason with because she's always right in a very cold way. I didn't call my husband either, not because I was afraid, but because I don't know where to start. Instead, I opened an old folder called Cruise, Contracts, Legal Documents. I used to save everything because I'm the type of person who likes to keep things clear. Boat purchase contract, certificate of ownership, transfer receipt. And then I saw it. A text from the original lawyer. The couple co-own, split the operation and use rights on a 50-50 basis. My name is right below Lyle's name. My signature is still there, same date signed. A strange feeling came over me, not anger. No damage. But, reshape reality. I am no longer the wife waiting for an invitation. I am a person has legitimate rights. Deliberately left out of the very story he helped write. I got my phone back. And this time I didn't surf the net. I texted the family lawyer. Hi Paul. Do you still have a copy of the Solstice ownership contract? Just a few minutes later he replied. Yes. You are still the legal co-owner, no exclusion clause. What's wrong? I looked at the screen. And smiled. Not a winning smile. But it is the smile of a person just remembered who I am. That night I cleaned out the closet. Not out of anger nor out of escape. But to choose the things that truly belong to you. I opened my old suitcase, the one I had packed 2 weeks ago for the trip. White coat, long skirt. Sandals I picked out specifically because the deck was slippery. I don't leave anything out. But this time I packed for me, not for acceptance. I picked up a leather notebook. The first page still in ink. To the next chapter. The day I received this book was the day the boat launched. Valora smiled and said, "It suits someone who likes to take notes like you." Looking back now I wonder, was that a sarcastic joke? The next morning I sent a message to the family group. See you all in Newport. No one answered for the first 2 hours. Then my mother-in-law dropped an emoji, a boat. Valora then sent me a single message. What are you talking about? I did not answer. I don't have to. I learned that. Silence is the clearest form of power statement. I booked the ticket. Hire a private taxi to the port. And as the car glides along the coastal roads, I see each white wave as if beating against my own heart. I took a deep breath. I don't feel bitter anymore. I feel a cold peace. It's like getting up, dusting off your knees, and moving on. When I arrived at the marina, the receptionist held up a check-in list. Hello, my name is. I give the co-ownership certificate. No explanation. Just a piece of paper. Fact. He skimmed through it, then looked up, and said that sentence, the sentence I will remember forever. Welcome aboard, owner. No sister-in-law. No family guests. No Mrs. Lyle. Just, owner. I walked up the wooden stairs with surprisingly light steps. The sea wind was salty and strong, but it didn't knock me over like before. Because this time I know, I'm not just standing here because someone said so. I am here because I have the right. And on the deck, in the corner of my eye, I see Valora. Lyle stood beside him. Glass in hand. They don't wave. Not smiling either. They were stunned. And me? I just nodded slightly. As calm as if I had never left. As if I had never been eliminated from the game. I'm not trying to attract attention. Don't say anything, don't approach anyone. I just sat down on the chair at the stern facing the sea. The white dress fluttered silently in the wind. No one said anything. But I felt all eyes on my back. Maybe they are waiting for an explanation. Or an apology. Something to keep them going in the conversation that I had interrupted. I don't say. Because I understood. A solid presence is the most complete response. Lyle was the first to approach me. He sat beside me, saying nothing for the first 15 seconds. I don't look over. Only when he spoke up. You surprised me. I replied softly. Definitely. Then silence. He sighed. Why didn't you ask before coming? I turned. For the first time. I really looked into the eyes of the man I once thought was my destiny. And I said, because I don't need to ask permission. I know that statement can make the atmosphere heavier. But that's okay. Because this is no longer a story about trying to maintain harmony. This is the story I am regaining my own gravity. In the evening, everyone had dinner on the deck. Lanterns sparkle. Valora was the one to offer drinks. As always. We have a chance to be together again, she said. Family is where we return. A few people smiled and raised their glasses. I raised my glass too. But I didn't look at Valora. I look out to sea. Where water and sky become one, no one needs to define the name. It was my turn to stand up. Unrequited. But I felt I should say something. I took out a piece of paper. A printout from the email dated the boat purchase contract. I don't read aloud. I just put it on the table, pushing it towards Valora. Paul sent it back to me. He was also the original editor. He said, your name was still there. Right at the top. Co-owner. The table suddenly became incredibly quiet. I don't need to scream, because truth never need to raise your voice. Valora put down her glass. She didn't say thank you. Just skim the text, then look up. I know. We just want to keep things clean and simple. I smiled. Sometimes, keeping things tidy inadvertently sweeps people away. We looked at each other. A conversation without sound. I am not looking for recognition. I just re-established the truth. That I'm still here. And always will be. After dinner, no one said anything more. Everyone dispersed. Not because he was full, but because the air was thick enough to be still. I went back to the cabin, room 4. Still the same room I chose. Still the thin curtain with a wavy pattern. The only difference is this year they may have decided to without me there. The suitcase I put down made a light clack sound. I sat by the bed, untying my hair tie. No mirrors. No lights. Just sitting there in the barely there light from the deck lights. I think not everyone is bad to me. Maybe they just don't know how to make me a part of their story. Or worse, they never think I do. Shooties apart. That night I did not sleep. I just turned the pages in the leather notebook. No new entries. Just reread the old passages. There is a page where I write. If one day they forget their names, let what you create remind them. I paused for a long time on that line. Not because it's profound, but because it was written when I was still trying to be a nice person, a reasonable person, a good daughter-in-law. Now it's different. I don't try any more favorite. I am learning how to survive, stand firm, no need for applause from the audience. The next morning when I went up on deck, the atmosphere was different. No more big hellos. There was no laughter. Only Valora was holding a cup of coffee, her back turned. I stood beside him, saying nothing. She glanced, then asked, "Are you staying the whole trip?" I took a sip of tea and nodded slightly. This is my trip too. No response. There was only the sound of the boat cutting through the water, gentle and steady. I turned and said, as an affirmation, "Valued. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just came to take back the chair I used to sit on." She smiled faintly. That's good. Many people dream of not having a chair to sit on. I looked at her. Eyes fixed. Then I set up the chair myself and sat in it, even if I'm alone. As I left the deck, I felt neither sad nor angry, but as if I just planted a tree. Right in the middle of the yard they thought I would never cross. I have not seen it flower yet, but I know the roots are already down. It rained that afternoon. Not big, just a few streaks. Enough to wet the wooden stairs and deck frame. I was sitting in my room writing when Lyle knocked on the door. "Can I come in?" I nodded. The door opened without a sound. He walked in, no flowers. No apology, just a man, looking awkward. I put down the pen. "Wait for me to speak first. You turned the whole ship around, you know that?" I smiled slightly. "No. I just stepped up. The boat turns when you hide it too long." Lyle sighed. He sat down on the wooden chair opposite, not daring to look for long. "I didn't know Valora was going to write you off. I didn't think things would go this far." I tilted my head. "Don't think? Or don't want to know?" He was silent. I looked straight at him. "Why don't you stand by me, Lyle? I know you don't fit into my family, but you are my wife. You have been silent for 5 years. Lyle bowed his head. "I'm not good at choosing sides, because if you choose, your family will be broken. And if I don't choose, I'm hurt." That sentence made me speechless. There are truths we don't want to hear but still need to know. That not everyone who betrays us does so out of hatred. Some people are just too weak to stand up for what is right. I got up and went to the window. Outside it was drizzling. Wind blowing through the cracks in the glass. Not cold, but enough to remind me I'm alive, not in a family album anymore. "Lyle, I don't need you to be a hero. Just one time when I was crossed off." "You asked why?" He did not answer. I turned back. He stood up and was about to leave. But before opening the door, he said, "Maybe only now can I truly see you." I did not stop him. No need anymore. Because now I know clarity does not come from being chosen by others, but from the moment we stop asking for permission to exist. That evening, I received a text message from Jen, Valora's niece. "You are doing something very right. When I was little, I always thought you were the only one who didn't need to act. Hope to see you tomorrow." I read the message 3 times. Not out of surprise, but because sometimes real looks come from people we least expect. I didn't sleep all night. Not because of anger, but for the first time. I don't have to squeeze myself to fit in with someone else. I took out an old envelope. The last handwritten letter from my father, who never met Valora, but always reminded me of one thing. If you find yourself pushed away from the table, don't be angry. Go and set up your table. Then you'll see who really wants to sit with you. I folded the letter. Light, but heavy as an oath. The next morning I got up early. Jog around the deck. No one is there. Just the sea and the wind. I feel healthier than I have in recent months. Not for fitness, but because my head is no longer confused. I stopped counting how many times I was quietly erased. Now I count the steps I take. Right direction. After breakfast, I wrote a list. Not the people who hurt me, but the things I quietly built, and then others labeled. Family cruise ideas. The logo is embroidered on the towel. The slogan, "Tide brings us home." Last year's sunset vow party. All from my hands. I found the email, the bill, the original message. And each piece of evidence is like a piece of a painting I once painted but never signed. In the afternoon I called my lawyer. Just ask one question. Do I have full voting rights as a co-owner? He said, you do. And more. Thanks. Then hang up. I know I don't need to use that right to push anyone away. Just stand where you belong. That evening, Valora held a traditional storytelling session as usual. Everyone was invited to tell a memorable story on the boat. I sit at the end of the table. No one invited. No one stopped it. I stand up. The sound of chairs moving created a brief pause, enough to silence the entire deck. I said, does anyone remember the first year of the sunset vow? A few people nodded. Some people are confused. I smiled. That idea came from someone who didn't have a seat at the table. I stopped, pulling a photo from my pocket. I'm sitting at the drawing board designing invitations. The signature is still there. Bottom right corner. Doyle. I said, I do not tell to thank. I tell you this to remind you that not all beautiful things come from applause. I bow, then sit down. For the first time, I wasn't shaking. No one nodded. I have told my part. After I sat down, no one said anything. There was only the light sound of forks hitting plates, the sound of wine glasses clinking together. But no one looked straight at me. No one denied it. Nor did anyone say thank you. Valora sipped her wine as if she had heard nothing. Lyle looked down at his lap. Jen sat close to me, her hand resting lightly on the table as if she wanted to touch me but didn't dare. I don't blame anyone. Because I know, when the truth is told, those who are used to living in silence will not know how to handle it. After dinner, I went back to my room. The door closed, I sighed. Not because I was tired, but because I felt lighter. I used to think if I tell the truth, I will be hated. But now I know, hate is hate. At least now they really hate me. Not a fake gentle version. I turned on the nightlight and opened the book. Write nothing. Just let the soft yellow light shine on a sentence I once wrote. They don't need to understand, but they will no longer ignore it. The next morning I went out to the deck early. The sky was still gray and cloudy, but the wind was light. I stood looking towards the east, where the sun was about to rise. Valora stepped out. She said nothing. Just stand by. I thought she would leave, but she didn't. She said, you kept everything? The photos, emails, the bills. I don't look at her. Just a quick word. Some keep the fire. Some keep the evidence. Valora chuckled. Don't you think it's petty? I turned. Or not. Big things often start from small things that are overlooked for too long. She was silent. The wind blew her hair back. She no longer had the look of an organizer, someone in control of everything. As she turned away, I added, value. I am not here to claim recognition. I come to prove, even when surrounded by silence, you still clearly exist. This afternoon, I received a small card from Jen. Neat handwriting. You are the reason I started to believe that kind people don't always keep quiet. Thank you for standing up, even though no one asked you to. I put the card in the old leather book. No need to fold the page. Because I know, the new page is opening automatically. That afternoon, Lyle knocked on the door. In his hand was a stack of papers. I want to show you something. I take it. It's a yacht ownership contract with 2 signatures. My name is Marjorie Doyle. His name is Lyle Keene. At the bottom of the page, a small note reads, "The rights of use and operation cannot be changed without the consent of both parties." I looked up. Lyle said, "I will not let anyone erase your name again, including you." I looked at him for a long time, not because of emotion but because I believable. For the first time in years, I believe. Not everyone stays silent forever. I woke up the next morning, my head comfortably empty. No more repetitive questions like, what did I do wrong? No more checklist of things to prove. I made a cup of coffee and sat down at the small desk in the room. Laptop opened, and for the first time in years, I wrote. Not a proposal email. Not an analysis. But a first chapter. Mine.
Understand.
The title I chose is very simple. The woman they tried to edit out. I don't write long. Just tell what happened. The yacht story. The Valora story. The crossed out story. No harshness, no distortion, just as it is. I sent the first draft to a former editor who had worked with me before I left to take care of the Lyle family. She replied after 2 hours. This is not just an essay. It is the knife that opens a box that has been locked for too long. I don't think much. Just sent it to a women's experience sharing website, which has an I was erased section. 2 days later, the article was published. 3 days later, more than 400 emails arrived in my inbox. Not just words of encouragement, but other stories have also been erased, blurred. One person wrote, "You tell me your feelings, the daughter-in-law who is always called by the wrong name." Others say, "Your story is the reason I canceled family dinner, because I realized I didn't need to be there to nod anymore." Valora has not responded publicly, just quietly deleted the previous post about the cruise where my name was not mentioned at all. Jen texted me, "You just did something that many people in this house have never dared to do, live authentically." I don't feel happy winning. I just feel peaceful. Because the first time, I didn't react out of hurt. I act because you know you are valuable. A week later, a women's magazine invited me to attend the Voice That Stayed conference. They asked me if I was available to talk. I thought for a moment, then agreed. Not to tell a story of revenge, but to tell someone sitting at the end of the table, quietly, like me back then, that they don't need to be invited to stand. The night before the conference, I video called Maya, the daughter of my brother-in-law, whom I rarely see. The girl was shy, but her voice was warm. "I finished reading the article, teacher, and I think tomorrow you should stop being so modest. Speak like someone who has walked through it, because I am walking along." I choked. Not because of pride, but because of knowing a circle has been closed. Not everyone stays silent forever. And if one person stands up, others will find their way. I stood in front of the mirror and adjusted my collar slightly. Not for beauty, but to straight. Like my back after every story that has been told. The auditorium is not too big. But the seats were full. Not by reputation, I am not a celebrity. But because of the echo from a story that everyone has seen a part of themselves in. The host invited me up. I walked out, head held high in defiance. Just keep breathing evenly. The light shines down. I saw dozens of eyes, not examining, not appreciating. "But wait," I said. "When I was a kid, I was taught, if no one mentions your name, do better." Growing up, I realized sometimes they saw my name, but they deliberately ignored it. The audience was silent. A kind of silence, not stuffy. "But pay attention." I continued. And when that happens enough times, you start to wonder, do I really exist? I tell, not all. Just enough slices for someone to look at and reflect on themselves. I told the story of being removed from the trip, keeping receipts, the story of standing up at the table, rewriting the story, not to win over anyone but to be true to yourself. And then I conclude with a sentence. I don't tell this to reopen a wound. I tell to prove. Even a scar can be a badge if we dare to keep it. The whole room stood up. Not a loud applause, but each person, each emotion, standing in silent agreement. As I left the stage, a middle-aged man, salt and pepper hair, notebook in hand, walked up. I used to leave my wife sitting alone at my dinner table for 20 years. Today I go home, will invite her to sit next to me. Not because of guilt, but because I see you. I shook his hand. Say nothing. Because sometimes one does not need to apologize, just start over properly. That night when I got home, I sat on the balcony. Cool wind. High sky. No one around. But I not found. Because for the first time I don't need to look to anyone to measure my worth anymore. I turned on the phone. The screen displayed a notification. The article the woman they tried to edit out had just reached 1 million views. No ads. No drama involved. Just a story told properly. At the right time. For those who have considered not worth listening to. A month after the sharing session, I received an invitation from a university. No talking. But join a mentoring project, connecting women who are starting businesses, especially those who are overcome prejudice in family or community. I hesitated a little. I am not an economist. Not good at raising capital. I just know I was silenced, and then stood up with my own voice. The sender of the invitation wrote, "You don't need to teach them to be successful. She just needs to be present, to let them know. She has the right to exist fully." I agree. Not because I think I'm strong enough, but because I was once so weak that I thought I couldn't open my mouth. And I want to, someone who doesn't have to go through it alone like I did. In the beginning, I sat with a small group, 5 girls. Each person has a story. A person who was once left out of the co-founder list, even though he was the one who initiated the idea. A person who is always called online sales girl by relatives, even though she is running a $2 million startup. A man just broke up after 7 years of marriage because he was too independent. I don't give them advice. I just recount, slowly, haltingly, each passage I have passed through. They used to call me Lyle's wife. But now they know I have a name and a surname. And an emotional copyright that no one can take away. They did not clap. They just nodded. As if every word I said was unlocking some silent lock within them. A week later, Maya texted me. Her voice trembled. I just stood up at the family dinner. And let me be clear. I no longer want to be seen as the young lady living off the Keens. I said I have a name, a job, and a dream. I asked, and what was the reaction? Maya said, they were silent. But Grandma's eyes were a little red. As for Uncle Lyle, he looked at me for the first time as if he were seeing a real person. Teacher, if you didn't tell me your story, I would never have believed that I could talk. I did not answer immediately. Just look at the screen. Think about one thing. The voice is not for argument, but to open the way. That night, I wrote myself an extra line in the old notebook where I used to jot down the little things that were ignored. When you are the first to tell the story, you don't just heal. You pave the way for people who would never dare put their name at the beginning of a paragraph. The final meeting of the mentoring group took place in a small, not fancy, but full of laughter cafe. Each person brings something to share, not a plan, not a report. Just a piece of life they dared to hold on. The first girl spoke. I just officially signed the investment contract. But what makes me happiest is that for the first time, when they mention the startup name, they mention me first, not someone else. The second girl said, my mother apologized the other day. Not because she doubted me, but because she said she was afraid I would be isolated. But now she sees I'm not isolated. I'm leading the way. I sat listening without feeling the need to contribute anything. Because they don't need guidance anymore. They are telling in their own voices. As the conversation was coming to an end, someone in the group asked me, do you think you'll make this into a real show? For many others. Because I see there are hundreds, thousands of people like me who need a table like this to sit at. I was silent for a moment. Then looked down at the paper I was doodling. A circle in the middle is a word, legacy, legacy. Not the house. Not the name. But is the ability for someone to feel seen, to exist. To be respected, even though no one has ever called them by their real name. I said, I will try. But it won't be in my name. But the name of anyone who has ever been ignored. 2 weeks later, I posted the first post for the new project. Quiet builders, the builders in silence. No flashy logos. There are only stories. Those who were once considered second class now stand up and tell the story of how they created the foundation. Surprisingly, responses came from places I didn't expect. A black doctor from Georgia, a single mother of Mexican descent in Texas, a transgender man in Seattle. They do not ask for help. They post. Tell them they used to build something too in silence and now want to give voice to the next person. I sat in the middle of the living room where I used to bow my head and quietly pour tea for my mother-in-law. Now, I'm preparing the schedule for the podcast series. The Unnamed. One episode, one story. It doesn't have to be spectacular. Just be real. Just open the door for someone who is sitting in the dark and doesn't know you can knock. That evening, Maya sent me a photo. The girl was standing in the middle of a group of friends, holding a microphone and speaking at a student event. Under the photo, Maya wrote, "You didn't have to come, but you were there, because I was speaking in a voice that I learned from your silence." I put the phone down. And no, I just built the first table. I had no intention of returning to the seaside villa where the Lyle family had taken long vacations to which I was only invited if there was a shortage of people. But this year, my mother-in-law celebrated her 75th birthday. And in a brief email she wrote, "We look forward to seeing you. Not child. Not dear Marjorie. Just she." But for me that was enough to turn back. Not for them, but because I wanted to see clearly, the pain of the past. Is it still knocking on the door? I arrived more than an hour late. No rush, no regrets. I chose to wear a dark blue dress, a color that Valora had said didn't suit her skin. And I brought not a gift, but a first edition copy of a new book, The Unnamed, for you, if you want to read it. When I walked in, a few people turned to look. No one is surprised. No one ran to hug. But no one dares to ignore me like before anymore. Valora was standing in the small bar area, talking to a group of customers. When she saw me, she stopped for half a second, then said loudly, a little forced, "Oh, you're finally here." I replied with a sentence as light as the sea breeze. "You know, I'm usually late." But I still came. We said nothing more. No more cold. No longer hope for reconciliation. Just two women, once at opposite ends of power, are now walking away from a battle that neither is interested in winning. I gave the book to my mother-in-law. She flipped through a few pages, then asked, "This is from what you lived?" I nodded. She was silent for a moment, then said, "I don't think it's worth it. But if it helps someone, it's worth it." I did not answer. I just feel something old melting in my heart, like a stone exposed to the sun for a long time. Lyle was also present. He came to shake my hand, his eyes a little shy. And then he said softly, just enough for me to hear, "I know. I've been silent for too long. Maybe left you alone in a family that I was supposed to protect you from." I looked at him. No blame. I just feel sorry because if that man could have said what he said today, maybe everything would have been different. Thank you, Lyle. But I didn't come to remind you of anything. I came to confirm one thing. I don't need your confirmation anymore. He nodded. And for the first time, I saw him relieved to let go of a woman instead of clinging on in silence. When I left the party, I walked away alone, just like old times. But this time, no one saw me as a stranger. And more importantly, I no longer feel like a stranger in my own story. 3 days after that birthday, I received a strange email. Not from a support group. Not from old friends, not from anyone I've ever proactively connected with. The sender's name is Reverend Martha Green, pastor of a small community church in Minnesota. The email subject was just one word: thanks. In the letter she wrote, "I don't know you, but I read a copy of your book, sent by an anonymous woman in my community. We just had a small book reading where 12 women, of all colors, spoke for the first time about the times they were left out of the story in their own families. I finished reading. My eyes were stinging, not because of emotion, but for the first time I saw all the silence that I have walked through is now echoing somewhere without me calling out." A week later, I appeared on a podcast for women of color, Legacy Interrupted. They didn't ask me about the yacht. Don't ask me about my ex-husband. They asked, "Who are you?" When you're not associated with the key name. I laughed, then replied in a voice as light as a cloud, I am Marjorie Lynn, the person who was removed from a trip, and now opening hundreds of doors for others to embark on their own journeys. The podcast spread faster than I thought. Not viral, not a trend, but like small streams, silently, nourishing the soil under mountains once considered uninhabitable. I received a handwritten letter. A woman in Alaska writes, "You are the reason I called my daughter back after 7 years of anger." A transgender person in Chicago texted, "I used your podcast to open my first therapy session with my mother." A recently divorced wife writes, "I don't need them back. But at least I stopped wondering, was it wrong for me to tell the truth?" I did not respond at all. Not enough time. But I kept every piece of story they sent, like a map. The map doesn't take me anywhere but reminds me, we are not alone in our silence. That afternoon while making tea, I heard a voice message from Maya. Her voice was excited. "Hey, I was just chosen to host a TEDx talk at school. And I will start with a quote from her. It doesn't have to be the main character. Just don't be the one whose name is misspelled." I was silent for a few seconds. Then laugh. No more bitterness. No more resentment. Just a smile. When you realize the small thing you dare to say is exactly what others need to start saying for themselves. One Saturday afternoon, I received an invitation to speak at the Women's Leadership Conference in New York. This year's theme, visibility and voice, presence and voice. I was going to refuse, not because of fear, but because I'm not sure if I have anything more to say. Over the years, I have written, told, and given way to others to tell. I no longer have the urge to be heard. I just want to live. And the voice I have chosen to keep. But then that night, I turned on my computer and watched the transcript from the first podcast episode. I sat looking at the old version of myself, sitting upright, speaking in a shaky but clear voice. I don't want anyone to apologize. I just want people like me to know that no one has the right to write your story while you are living it. I press pause, lean back in your chair, and understand. It's not that I've run out of things to say. It's that I'm no longer speaking for myself. I accept. The conference took place in an old theater, where hundreds of women sat together, not so much to listen to speeches, but to quietly sew themselves together. I walked onto the stage to soft background music. No flashy introduction. Do not show emotional videos. Just me, standing there, with a microphone. I opened with a very soft sentence. For a long time, I thought I was the one who was kept silent. But now I know. I was just someone who believed that silence was the price of staying in the room. I tell you not the yacht story, but the story I once bowed my head. Once silent. I used to leave my name off the list for fear of upsetting someone. And then I end with an image. If you ever see your name crossed off any list, remember, the only nameplate you need to keep is the one engraved in your heart. Because that name doesn't need anyone's approval. It exists because you lived. When I walked off the stage, there was no thunderous applause. Just the women, one by one, stood up, looking at me, as if they were seeing themselves in a mirror, but for the first time no avoidance. I didn't go to the after party that night. I went back to the hotel, took off my makeup and made a cup of mint tea. Then sit by the window, looking at the city lights like a map of nameless dreams. And I thought, maybe in the end, I don't need a conclusion. I just need to move on. Continue not writing to prove. Don't speak up to take back the stage. But to keep one thing clear. I am a living person and I have the right to live by my own name. One Sunday afternoon, as the New York sky was just casting pale spots of sunlight on the street corner, I sat in a small cafe with rough brick walls and bougainvillea climbing up to the ceiling. I am writing a letter to a young woman named Elise, a senior literature student. She wrote, "Marjorie, I used to feel like a supporting character in my own life. But after your TEDx talk, I started writing again. Not a script, but an introduction to myself. I type slowly. Dear Elise, there are people who will only remember your name if it is in the apology. But there is a whole world that will miss you if you live true. Right? It doesn't have to be perfect. Just be honest. Because the truth is the last thing they can't take away." I closed the computer, leaned back in my chair and exhaled lightly. The old jaw pain, which had persisted throughout the elimination phase, was gone. I no longer grind my teeth in my sleep. No more waking up at 3 a.m. wondering, am I being too sensitive? Did I do something wrong? The answer is no longer yes or no, which is, if you have to ask too many questions, then maybe the place was never yours to begin with. I still keep the name Keen on some legal documents, not because of regret, but because it reminds me that chapter is over, a chapter where I was silent, and then chose to speak up, not to denounce, but to survive. That evening, Maya, the niece who had been on the silent side, called me, her eyes shining. Teacher, next week I will lead a workshop for the excluded girls in the study group, and I would like to borrow a sentence from you to start. You don't need to be invited onto the stage. You just need to remember you have a voice. I heard her say that and choked up. The family that tried to erase my name from the cruise ship cabin. Now there is a new generation carving their own names. And this time it's engraved with permanent ink. I still remember the feeling of being crossed off the schedule that first day. That emptiness was once a crack. Now it is a bright spot. Where I grow they do not water me. Don't ask them to call your name. No need for them to apologize. I'm not looking for a place anymore. I stand in the middle of the name I kept and rebuilt. If you're listening to this very last second, I don't need you to share the video. No need for you to comment that you sympathize. I just hope. Remember one thing. Don't live as if you have to wait for someone to assign you a role. Your role is you. Don't fight to be invited to the table. Build your own table. And when someone quietly walked up, asked, "Can I sit with you?" Smile like I'm doing now. And said, "Of course, as long as you don't try to mute anyone else." The wind blew gently through my hair. The purple silk scarf that was once criticized as old is now fluttering behind the neck. I see myself beautiful. Not the kind of beauty that gets recognition, but the beautiful type, when you know you've come back, not to be seen, but to enlighten oneself.